Welcome to Workforce Accessibility for All Ages, a webinar series brought to you by the Age-Friendly Greater Pittsburgh Workforce Group. This webinar series seeks to cover successes, challenges, and resources job seekers might experience or need in re-entering or re-engaging the workforce. This series is an effort to create an equitable as well as equal workforce in Allegheny County as well as the city of Pittsburgh. Hello and welcome to Workforce Accessibility for All, the webinar series season 2. My name is Monique Yost. I am one of the co-chairs from the Age-Friendly Greater Pittsburgh Workforce Group. My colleague Charles Howe will also be joining us. Charles, please.
Good day. I'm Charles Howell. I'm the Director of Workforce Development for Mon Valley Initiative and co-chair for the Workforce Subcommittee here for Age-Friendly Greater Pittsburgh.
Perfect. On today's episode, we will be discussing intersectionality with organizations that are locally available. At this time, I'd like to open up the floor to give our panelists an opportunity to introduce yourselves. Please share your role, your name, and your organization.
Go ahead,
I'll
Sandy.
go
ahead.
I'm going to jump in and then we
Right.
say at the same time. Hi, I'm Sally Jo Snyder. Quickly, I am, I have to say, ordained United Methodist clergy. So bring that perspective definitely from the community partner piece of this. And I have worked for the last 15 years with persons with disabilities, definitely in terms of looking at health disparities, health inequities, and the social determinants of health. And currently, I contract with Achieva, which is, let's just name it, a titan in the disability field, been around since 1951, a force in terms of advocacy, employment, housing, the whole ball of wax. Obviously, Achieva definitely focusing with individuals with developmental disabilities, intellectual and developmental disabilities. My work in the project I'm on and for these past 15 years has been very much cross disability, which I think is significant and important to bring those various pieces to weigh into this as well. So the last thing I'll say, and you're like, good God, we're going to be here all day if this is our intro. The last thing I'll say is I was one of the founding members to serve on the governor's advisory committee for persons with disabilities, which was when, it's going back. It was under the Corbett administration, then kicked in to Wolf, and then whole big tale of woe. But why I share that is when it first started, I then kind of coordinated here in the lovely western part of the state, and we did an entire series on employment. In fact, when it was, okay, here's this cross disability group of folks around the state, what are the big issues? And it was a survey, and number one, no shock, was employment. So can weigh in a little bit of that as well. And finally, good God, Rob, I'm going to shut up and let you go.
Oh, how do I follow that? That was outstanding. But my name is Rob Hodap. I'm a business services and outreach specialist for the Pennsylvania Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. And I don't know everybody's point of reference who's going to be viewing this, but the Pennsylvania Office of Voc Rehab, there is a version of us around every state and U.S. territory across the country. And our mission is to help people with disabilities prepare for, attain, or maintain employment and independence. So that is our goal, is to get people competitively employed. So I am a business services specialist and I'm a regional specialist. So my job is to assist the OVR offices in Western Pennsylvania with any services and support that they are for partnering with our business customers, because that is our goal, is to get people with disabilities employed. So if we get people ready for employment and they got nowhere to go, it's kind of pointless from there. So that's what I do in a nutshell. But and I guess I'll be quiet now.
No, we welcome all enriched and robust conversation. So we will definitely not cut you guys off until 30 minutes, but still then.
So you don't want to cut off the clergy. You don't want to be messing with that.
No,
Preacher shall preach.
There's 2 of them on here, so yes.
Oh my word!
okay.
So we're covered. Okay.
Right. So let's get into it. First question is, how does intersectionality play a role in your success as an employer or community partner?
I think that is absolutely key in all of this, as we come to understand that we are so much more than the labels that people want to attach to us. And it starts from allowing persons to identify themselves however they choose to do so. When we would have weekly meetings of a crew of cross-disability folks, self-advocates, we always open the meeting with some pretty easy breezy question and to allow you to introduce yourself however you see fit. I think that's absolutely critical, and especially in terms of working with folks with disabilities who are so easily labeled in a way that often is less than. It's not a gold star, it's a feel for you label, and that becomes the only thing they are. And that's problematic. I think intersectionality, I'm thrilled that we're at this point now, because it broadens the breadth of who you are and how you come to know yourself and identify yourself. And any sort of employment venue, work site, absolutely. The more diverse it is, the more accepting and involving all the pieces, I think that the more successful it is, not only for the employment, but also not being cheesy, hallmarky, backlit, but also I think for the vitality of the community.
Yeah, I mean, I really like what you had to say, Sandy, and I know at OVR that's very important for us. And I know what you mean by people getting labeled. And we do a lot of outreach to businesses, disability awareness and things that we take for granted as common knowledge. A lot of people don't know. When they hear the word disability, they think, oh, somebody in a wheelchair, somebody using a walker, somebody who's blind, the most obvious. But at OVR, we work exclusively with people with disabilities, and probably 90% of the people we serve have disabilities that are not obvious. Someone who's got a learning disability, someone with a mental health condition, somebody with a medical condition, multiple sclerosis, lupus, and contrary to what people might think, many people that have those conditions don't use wheelchairs or walkers, and they look, quote, perfectly fine, but they may need accommodations to do the job and get through their day because of some other symptoms. So that's and that's definitely one of the things, and you said it yourself, Sandy, the person's disability, they're more than just that. They don't just live and breathe blindness or whatever their condition is. They're a whole person. And at OVR, all of our cases are individualized. So if somebody comes to them, and when counselors meet with somebody for the first time, it's usually a very long session because they want to know everything about the person. What are some things in addition to their disability? What are some other things they bring to the table that that we may need to help them with some job readiness? It could be everything from educational background, could be maybe a learning disability and things like that, and they've got to get some training and some assessments on how to accommodate. And they might bring to the table maybe they're older workers, because at OVR we work with people, anybody who wants to work competitively. When I was a field counselor, I closed a lady who was 85. She was working part-time. Somebody could have a criminal record. These are all things that make up who that person is and where they come from. But I think that's the one thing that I liked about OVR. There was no cookie cutter approach to working with an individual. So.
Yeah, and I think just to chime in, we having the robust part of this is I think critical to emphasize what Rob and I have both said is the individual centered basis too, which is how we get away from the label, right? That you self-identify who you are and what your skills and talents are. And often, with persons with disabilities, you get relegated to the 3 F's, right? Food, fetch, or filth. And that's effed up to continue that thought. But no, it really is. But that happens all the time. Instead of saying, I really like to work with animals, it's never too often. It's not that it's, well, you're a person with a disability. How about you go bag groceries at Giant Eagle? And not that there's anything wrong with bagging groceries at Giant Eagle, but can we start from the basis of what the person wants to do, how they understand their gifts and graces? So
exactly, working with their strengths to get the maximum in the workforce.
Absolutely. This is kind of a branch off question, but still related. You both mentioned challenges that folks face. How do you recommend clients or participants or folks that you're working with, how you help them cope or manage with those challenges? Sally, you mentioned the 3 F's, right? Which that will stick with me probably forever, right? So how do you help or empower folks to really feel comfortable, not pushing back, but advocating for themselves, for lack of a better way of saying it?
No, and I think a lot of that is really what advocacy is, which is you have a support system and a group, right? That you gather and you have those. It gets maybe used too easily or lightly, but it's not. It's critical and foundational, which is your trust point. Those people that know you, that you can come back and say, you know, I went to this interview and they relegated me to doing food service. I hate food service. I don't want to do it. So then you have one of the things we use is, you remember the movie Inside Out, that great Pixar film with, you know, anger and frustration and sadness. I actually bought those figurines, and literally would use them like, is it, who we talking, is it anger, it's Mr. Anger today, and let them just vent and rant and whatever, or if it's sadness or if it's fear or disgust, that actually it really works. And then we can do it also in a group dynamic, right? To say, okay, it seems like there's angst here, we're just going to rant for a little bit, and then you get that out, you get that processed, and then we do some things. And I've done this work a lot with folks, is helping them, you know, how to interview and how to present your best self. And have been asked from some other groups too, would I meet with a certain person who wants to go into what? I'm like, absolutely. I'll meet with, talk with, encourage how to really present yourself well. Because let's be honest, interviewing can be a little scary process, right? And especially when you're coming in with so many labels already stuck to you, of which 90% of them you didn't put on yourself. You didn't put on the hello, my name is, it was stuck to you. So, you know, we do some of that work in that piece.
Yeah, I like what you said about self-advocacy, and that is probably one of the biggest things we work with OVR. You know, somebody could have acquired a disability later in life, and if you have a family member or something that views disability very narrowly, well, they can't do anything. They're blind or they're in a wheelchair or whatever. And then if you have a youth who was born with a disability, then you've got overly protective parents and things like that. And I think thanks to the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act 2014, which requires OVR and state entities across the country to dedicate 15% of our budget to getting paid work-based learning experiences for youth. And that's one of the big things is self-advocacy, because they're so used to having mom or dad go ask a question or reach out here and there. And I think many of those youth with disabilities, when I was a counselor, I would get someone in front of me that was 22 years old, absolutely no work history at all, not even chores around the house because it wasn't expected. So, and studies have shown that people who have jobs as youth tend to work throughout their life. So that's why that's so important for our pre-ETS program, pre-employment transition services youth, is to get them paid work-based learning experiences so they can say, okay, you know, I don't want to be a nurse aide, or I don't want to, you know, work in food service or whatever, and they can find out what they want to do. So, but yeah, all that self-advocacy stuff starts, you know, as soon as we get connected with them, regardless of age.
Yeah, and I think too, quick to come in with a story, right? An experiential story of, I'm going to share with you evidence of why I'm good for this job, right? There isn't a soul out there that wouldn't say they're not hardworking, right? If you do, you're kind of like, well, I'm not going to go to the top of the interview pool. Like, you know what? I really kind of slack off. I'll show up, but you know. So tell me, give me an evidence, a story, a quick little bit about showing me how you're hardworking. And when you open that up, they got them. And especially, you know, workers who have been at work for a while or maybe had a gap, senior workers, our lives are filled with stories, and stories play. We're people who, that's how we relate to each other, be it personal story, a book, a TikTok video. I'm trying to be hip with the TikTok thing.
You're killing it. Go ahead.
Yeah, but thank you. But whatever it is, stories are how we relate. When you shared, Monique, too, the 3F story, you're going to remember that. But a personal story that zings you, that you're like, okay, I'll remember that. That's going to connect. So I think we do work about encouraging people to come in, lead, tell me who you are and why you're good by an experiential story that you're going to share in a concise way, and we can help them to do that.
So alternatively, then, you know, we're talking about the ways in which you prepare folks with all of these sort of intersecting realities that they're living with. You prepare them to enter the workforce. What kind of work do y'all do to prepare employers to be accommodating workplaces for these kind of situations?
Well, I think that gets into, and I swear, Rob, I vow it, next time I'll bat second. I've just been leading off. Go Buccos, by the way, darn it. I'm a hopeful person. Go Buccos. I think part of that is the whole work that I think we all do, and Rob, I'm sure you do it, I know I do it, is the broader community education and really going at the whole nasty ism that we don't talk about a lot, which is ableism. It is so unbearably prevalent and just there from everything you can imagine, be it a faith group, how we talk, how we identify, how we build our cities, how we deal with anything. Ableism is this nasty root that we need to highlight and to deal with and to reach out and to connect with folks, with employers too, and just kind of fill them out a little bit, right? Like, I mean, there's here's a story. A friend of mine worked with helping to place folks, used to work with blind and vision rehab services, right? Yep. And so would go to place someone and would go to actually the person she was wanting to place for employment, loved to bake. Yay. So went to a local bakery. I'm going to be nice and not say the name, but went to a local bakery to say, hey, kind of feel the way out. This person would be great. She wants to be a baker. This would be a good place. And the bakery, which is really a good bakery in terms of its product, said, oh, we already have one of those. Oh, dear God. We already have one of those.
I've heard that before too.
Yeah. And because I was like, oh my, I confess to you in this bakery, did I mention it's really, really good? I said, in solidarity, I promise I will not go back to that bakery. Damn it. So I've not, and it's really taken one on the chin for me, but but so it's that type of piece, but it's doing what I'm doing now, is sharing that story. And then when you go out to talk with employers too, sharing stories like that to say, this happened, and it happened within the last 5 years. And how do we work to create and build a better society where this is not even occurring? And just the freedom to say that, like, oh my goodness, right? So go ahead, Rob, you're up.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. I'll just say amen to that because we have two ministers on the call here. But I think I'm kind of getting in our second question here. But yeah, outreach, and I do a lot of presentations on disability awareness, and I include a lot of stories and a lot of success stories that of people I know overcoming various disabilities and how they've accommodated. I have stories of a high-level engineer with a neurological condition who can't talk very well because of it. A woman who's deaf that is a top sales rep for her company in all the states that they operate in, has been for 8 years, and how you can accommodate those sorts of things. But and I think, as you all know, there's a big shortage of workers because of the pandemic, and it's really opened up some doors for people with disabilities because these companies are looking for other candidate pools. Because at OVR, everybody that we serve, they have interests. We have people training to be doctors, nurses, lawyers, engineers, tradespeople, craftsmen, all those kinds of things. So if it's an occupation out there, we have people in training for it. So what we've been partnering with are companies that have contracts with the federal government. 1 in 4 companies has a contract with the feds. And because of that, they're governed by laws that say you have to track and recruit minorities, women, people with disabilities, veterans, and so on. And they have to, and it's not just say, oh, we did, they have to have a report. So it's created a lot of these diversity, equity, inclusion departments at these companies, and they reach out to us. And of course, we reach out to them as well. And as they get to know us and we partner with them, it's not like we're selling our people with disabilities. Where it's like, okay, what do you do at your company? What are some of the jobs you're hiring for? What are some jobs you might be looking for 5 years from now? Because we take that information back to our counselors, and when they're doing counseling and guidance, which is probably the biggest service we offer, hey, these are the jobs that are trending right now, and these are jobs that are going to pay a good wage and give you a family sustaining income and things like that. So, companies that have well-established DEI programs, regardless of company size, are really companies that are really talking the talk and walking the walk, so to speak. As I know that's an old cliche term, but also too, some of the bigger companies have employee resource groups, ERGs, and things like that. For all the roles that somebody may have in their life. If they have a disability, if they're a veteran, if they're a woman, and so on. But I hope I'm making some sense. But I'm kind of rambling here. But I'll stop.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my kind of follow up to that is for those companies that aren't up to that standard, how do we encourage them and press them to move in that direction?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's just persistence. I mean, those companies that they generally think, we already got some of those people here. We we're kind of like you. We kind of steer away from them. We don't do business with them and that sort of thing because we don't want to set up our customers with disabilities to fail. If you got a company that the reason that they're not onboarding people is because they just don't know. They just don't know what they don't know. So we try to provide as much education as we can. So we try to invite them to over functions that we might have with sometimes we partner with you guys at Achieve and other agencies too. Just education is the key and persistence. And, oftentimes we'll get, if nothing else, a point of contact. Hey, we had, Jane Smith from OVR apply for this job. What do you think of her? And, you get a good success story in there and people are like, oh, okay, now they get it. And then when you start talking about disability, you've got people in your company right now that have disabilities. You just don't know it because of the non-obvious factor. And in fact, you talk to people, they'll come up to you afterwards like, hey, I've got diabetes or I've got MS too, or something like that. They just didn't think that it was that sort of thing. But I know I went around the retreat quite a long ways, Charles, but yeah, education is very important and persistence.
And I think so too. And also the education between businesses as well. So,
Yep.
because, let's have business talk to business too, right? Because
Yep.
sometimes we can be looked at as, oh, well, of course you're going to say that, but to have businesses where it's been successful, talk to businesses as well. And I just want to throw in, and I'm sitting there racking my brain. I can't remember the name of the group that did it, but it's going back probably 7-8 years. They had it ran on the TV. I know it hit Sunday morning. It was on because you saw that. I'm like, hey, there it is. But what it was a deal on hiring persons with disabilities. And as maybe Rob, this will spur your brain. I can't remember the deal, but it was really good. Was it starts out and the ad begins and there's a woman, African-American woman who uses a wheelchair. So you see her come in and the whole deal and she's going around. Then you see other people in her workplace and one, someone takes a cup of, can't drink the coffee's horrible, spits the coffee out. Someone else can't run the copier. Someone else is a loud talker, right? And someone else is a low talker. So you go through and it's humorous, all these venues. And then you go back to the first one you see and she says, yeah, in our company, we hire all types of workers. Joe, who's a low talker, Susie, who's a loud talker, was actually very creative, very funny, very witty, and very memorable. I'm going to look up. Do you remember? I thought it was just incredibly well done.
I can't remember what it is either, but it seems like that's ringing a bell. Yeah.
Yeah. And it ran. I remember seeing it on a Sunday morning going, hey, there it is on my way to church. I'm like, there it is. And then I think, and I saw a couple that I haven't seen. And again, I'm going back, but I share that rambling story to say the way, and now with all the social media we have, is there a way to do some of that, to promote in a way that's very creative, very fun, very memorable. I just thought that was perfect because, you're sucked in thinking, oh, okay, it was brilliant. So.
Absolutely. Cool. Thank you. Sally, your comment kind of jogged another question that I wanted to kind of pick out with both of you. Where would both of you recommend if you have an employee who's been employed for however long and they're noticing a lack of intention surrounding intentionality or intersectionality, I'm sorry. Where or who would you recommend that client go to, or a resource that they could utilize to kind of engage their employer surrounding intersectionality?
That's a good question. I know speaking is, and try to then get coming post-pandemic to build this up, but the group that I had, the cross disability group of self-advocates that met, that was such a supportive group that came together to not only allow the vent, but also to allow the seeking a strategy to go after. Because there's a time that you need to tell with somebody and have it be heard and understood, and then collectively to figure where to go. I will share with you, and I share this as a way that another thing of what we need to be doing when we were doing, I mentioned the governor's advisory piece. And when we did I think we did a series of 4 community forums. And when we were thinking, okay, who do we need to invite, right? And one of the things we determined was, let's go invite young people that are just starting out, like people who are majoring in, are going to work in human resource departments, right? So went to the local universities, of which there are a zillion here in Pittsburgh, and went there. And this was just so horrifying, where we're reaching out to invite and tell them what they were going to have this forum, please come, yada, yada, yada. And literally the majority of the most often heard response was, this was for persons with disabilities. Now that was the forum. The focus was, well, why would we want to come to that? Do those people work? This is
boy.
circa like 7 years ago. Hello, literally.
Cringe. Total
Yeah.
cringe.
Yeah, like, oh my gosh. But when you're that brazen and that out with something like that, there's a very dark and deep reality that's under the surface that allows you to feel freely to say, well, do they even work? Really? You know what I'm saying? So that share, there needs to be education with the various universities too. I mean, this whole ableism thing, just like, and not that we've done, God knows, racism well, or heterosexism well, or any of the isms well, or sexism well, but darn it, we've got to start going after this piece as well, because it is just so inherent in so much of what we do. If there's time at the end, I'll share my other favorite story about most horrific job interview, but I digress. Go ahead, Rob. Kick it to
Okay.
you.
So Monique, your question was, how can employees within a company get resources on intersectionality?
Or to advocate for intersectionality
advocate.
on site.
Oh, I at OVR, again, we work with people, our customers with disabilities come from all sorts of backgrounds. And oftentimes you just can go to some colleagues, as far as resources and information. But I've been at OVR 18 years, and I've been lucky to have a number of good supervisors along the way. Usually it could just start with them and say, hey, I need some more information on advocating and looking at people as more as a whole. And he'll go up and he'll ask, maybe upper management and things like that. But oftentimes too, our training division, and we do have a training division at OVR, and they can coordinate any number of trainings on any topics of interest or requirements. But and I know we actually, working for Pennsylvania, we have what we call a Commonwealth University, and there's any number of trainings you can get on anything that doesn't cost anything, and there's actually a whole series of trainings on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And but for us, it's we're counselors, and of course counselors tend to be accepting of everyone. So, and we have to network with a lot of different resources to help our customers with disabilities. So I think just asking people that we work with and supervisors is a great place to start for us.
And I think too, just having the support system for the person who was not experiencing a sense of intentionality, to have a support system that can talk with said person and say, all right, I hear you. How do we want to play it? If you need to go to the HR, we'll be supportive of you to do that, right? And to do some work in helping said person to go do that. And I also think, as well as dealing with the ableism as well, to be showing up when there are these gazillion fairs and employment things, wouldn't it be nice to have a visible presence there as well, right? Some booth, something that will really draw people in, and get it out. And again, I'm going to nail the universities too, that are training folks to go into human resources. Come on, let's pick it up a little bit. I'm real big at going to those who are the newbies coming into the field too, in terms of that piece, but.
For sure.
Great.
Rob, I may email you to ask about those training resources, because I think it would be great if it's okay to share as, I don't know, even an endpoint or a follow-up, because I think that could be an invaluable resource for employers or even organizations, not just workplaces, that are looking to be really intentional about their work and about their approach. So thank you.
Sure. Oh, I have to say, I have to leave in about 10 minutes I actually have to drive somewhere for an appointment. We were talking about all the virtual meetings, and everybody's got to, boom, boom, boom. So.
Right. It's weird, right? You have to prepare to go someplace.
I have to go somewhere.
Weird. I know what you mean, because I was in the office recently and it was a virtual call too, but we couldn't all be in the same room or else it was going to be echoing. So it was we had to plan where we are virtually on site. It was wild. So wild. Crazy.
Well, I just want to leave it with this last question then. for both of you, you've talked about, we've covered a lot of ground this afternoon. And one thing that you both have highlighted is the reality that ableism and ageism are really still two acceptable sort of isms too often, right? But as we continue to press the ball forward in terms of equitable workplaces and getting more diverse populations engaged in sustainable career paths and the like, for you all, what does the future then for diversity in the workplace look like? Like, what 5 years, 10 years, what does it look like? What do you all think we can anticipate?
I think it's what we're going to make it to look like. And I didn't want that to sound like a facetious, oh, okay answer. But seriously, the moment at hand is now, right? That we've come through this pandemic, kind of almost. We can see kind of the end of it, I think. But, the reality is now that we come back to kind of a new world and maybe a more digital world, we can shape this to be more than what currently it was, right? I would see it as that a given. Every workplace out there is accessible in terms of that's just a given, right? That it just is. And, we have too many situations when you're doing a fire drill and you look at your colleague who uses a wheelchair, like, I think you're kind of screwed, right? Because I don't know how you're getting out of here, right? I mean, I've been there, like, I'll stay behind to make the point, like, this person ain't getting out. Did we think of that when we created this space? No, but I think we really look to have that. And also we create spaces not only accessible, with the physicality of the building, but also accessible in just what it looks like. And I don't want to begrudge signage. And I don't want to begrudge when I show up to work that I'm seeing visible signs, posters, language that says, I'm welcome. We're all welcome here, right? That in this day and age should just be, right? That I'm seeing, posters of Black, whoever, Asian, all kinds of people their faces are there. I'm seeing them. I'm seeing rainbows. I'm seeing transgender, whatever it is, I'm visually seeing it. That conveys to me at first glance, this is a place that is going to be very inclusive and welcoming and diverse, as well as that has easily accessible, for persons with visual impairment. Braille is prominent, right? Materials are also in alternative format. It's just there. And I think it has to be that you can't miss that this is not who we are. Go ahead, Rob. I'm zipping now. I promise.
Okay. But I like what you have to say. And I agree. I think what we do with outreach, I mean, I do a lot of outreach and partnering with businesses. I think we are in a really good position to educate businesses because they just don't know what they don't know. And I think a lot of barriers that someone may face, regardless of what roles they have in life and ways they intersect, is because of ignorance. And if we can get out and with our partners educate these businesses, they're going to say, oh, okay, now I get it, and I think it'll open some doors. And I think the pandemic, as I mentioned before, has really helped people with disabilities because it's actually gone up significantly, people in the workforce with disabilities, like almost 5%.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people are like, oh, and that aha moment, now I get it, sort of thing. And but yeah, the education is very important, and accessibility too. And I do a lot of those sorts of things as well. I go to businesses, and we at OVR, we're not an enforcement entity. We do accessibility reviews of facilities, and we say, this is what you have, this is what you need. And all those sorts of things we look at is, is it easy to get into? Do they have an emergency plan if there's somebody, not only an employee with a disability, but what if they have a customer in there with a disability and they can't get out, they can't use the elevator? Do you have a plan to keep those folks safe, keep people in wheelchairs and things like that? So, but yeah, I mean, I think it's an exciting time. I think we have a long way to go, but I am very optimistic that, as things move forward, and if we do our jobs and educate businesses, I think it's a positive outlook.
And I think too, I lied. The clergy lied. I'm not zipping it. It's not my nature. But I just cannot. There has to be some heat put on the myriad of businesses who give you the line, well, we can't afford a reasonable accommodation. Yes, you can. Because 90% of the time they're not that costly.
Well, the law says they have to.
Exactly, but they'll say we
Because they
can't
have
afford
to.
it. Yeah.
They have
And then
to.
it's not,
A-
yeah,
And we do that negotiation all the time as at
good.
OVR. And if a company can't pay for it, we'll do
And
it. Smaller
yeah.
mid-sized companies, $1,000 is probably is expensive, and we can do that. But your bigger corporations, it's a drop in the bucket. And if they're saying they can, it's just like, well, okay, they're not really open
Yeah.
to hiring people with disabilities.
And that's the kick, and that needs to go back on because it's the line they use, and it's not even really, it's not that expensive at all. And then what the pandemic has taught us is, hey, look, like I've a ton of people with disabilities saying, I can't do 40 hours a week, but can I do 20 and do it at home? Well, now, yeah, you can. We've friggin' lived for 3 years doing that for the most part at home, right? So
Right,
Yep.
right.
I think there's an opportunity to use this as a springboard to even do more education and more awareness because we've lived it. We've experienced that. You know what? Yeah, we can do this. So anywho.
Yeah, well said, Sally Joe and Rob. Have to take a moment to thank both of you to kind of bring it full circle. Like our goal with these webinars is to provide a springboard to both of your points and to encourage folks to, as job seekers or even as employers, community organizations, et cetera, to really, dive right in feet first to this work, that there's support available, there's resources available. So thank you both for sharing your expertise. I'm still going to be thinking about a lot of this conversation, moving forward and as I continue my work as well. So thank you again to both of you. I will let you guys know whenever the link is live. And so thanks again, and I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend.
And thank
Special thanks to the following organizations for their contributions to the webinar. There will be a one-pager including tips for all ages relating to the content that you have seen and heard during this webinar series. Please feel free to reach out to any of these organizations for more information. This webinar series is brought to you by Age Friendly Greater Pittsburgh, an organization that seeks to ensure equitable and inclusive living for residents of the city of Pittsburgh and Allegheny County.